all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merits of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of the happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. I beseech the great Vrajadhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, Pakmudrupa, Lord Jigten Sungun, at the feet of the root guru, who possesses the three ways of kindness, and all the root gurus and spiritual masters of the lineage, the idams and dharma protectors. May your marvelous blessings permeate my mind. Good evening, Rinpoche. Rinpoche, could you please unmute your mic? Thank you.
Tongge tu jeje jere sendong yinje mando duje ponjong ba se je lombo tabe jipe shaje jabe jala ke zanza jar penje bola karenje pemane tonkalande tome tadalande sunba kanot orjin rambo jela ke zanza jisen kalanjira jongor jenze bo tondo zelenla jarwe timba kona sanze pe kaju rambo jela ke zanza jume sa tuje jomba da mande shimjanga bachata tamjin jimba kumjin chije je nyamen rongon renje ke zanza rame chije enje prana so sanje konyo rasen ju gong zong dongze zawa lama jala ke zanza da so semje namje je chu sen ro sinje la do so chu lam do ro sinje la do lan chowa sewa sinje la do so chowa ye ye zan jawa sinje la do so. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
Tani tomat chamala chamjutang tani tarang aran sota Ngondro la lobbyong chia tani gochu yores Ngondro gochu yes Ngondro lobbyong chia.
So hello everybody. First, and so today we are starting our course, our study in the Ngondro, the preliminaries.
Ta maksud puju nanti na tini junta sosol Ngondro yore pena zokchin Ngondro ta gelong Ngondro saja Ngondro tu yores tini terang as kaps papa te tini rukun kajuk Ngondro sakchin adin ki Ngondro yes ti korshes.
So in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, each of the different traditions and lineages has their own preliminary practices. For example, there's a preliminary Ngondro according to the Dzogchen, and then in the Gelugpa or the Sakya lineage and so on. And so today we are speaking about the Ngondro according to the Jigong Kagyu lineage. It is the Ngondro of the fivefold path of Mahamudra.
Ngondro hipate teni nganan so 추 냠네 시니에나 드니 문로데 하장게 기 침보 차거여레스 말아서 따라 추가래 냠네세나 문로 무위제 족 세나코 숨용도 하시 코숨가 차 창고에 지리마도 코숨 찍차마 상황에는 느껴요 말 숨가 차 창고를 빼는 맞이나 강바 드니 먹게 르포 드니 먹은 거 제와나 이코나 찍차마서 느껴 먼저 차 상황에는 먹을 수 보차 상황으로 빼디나기 드니 가서 드니 나추 냠네시 롭존시 pe chupa yapo chago na tini chu ngondro nguye njo tsama tini cha tsama jinga ku lobyon ta nyamin ro go yores.
So the preliminary practices are very important for a Dharma practitioner. No matter which Dharma we practice, we must first practice the preliminaries, then there is the main part of the practice, and then there is the conclusion in the end. And these three parts need to be complete. It's not good, okay, if there's one part that's missing. For example, a person's body must have legs and the whole body and a head and so on. It's not okay if one of those parts is missing, is it? So it's just like that. In the preliminary, the whole body has to be complete when we practice or study the Buddha Dharma. So if we want to become a good Dharma practitioner, then we must have those three parts complete of the preliminaries and the main part practice and then the conclusion.
파 식선로 지 단데 로마 닝바 망보 저기 지 홍로데 시다 자침보 마인바 홍로 냠니 소병선에 지 로마 서파한도 지 냠니 시야인바도 지 드르삼 방게 여러스 드르자와니 마레스 홍로 세야 되고 담봉고 좀 탈상 맞게 봐도 그런 로고야게 차진지 로고야게 집진지 연구 여러스.
So it may seem sometimes for the because many people are older practitioners, disciples, that they consider the preliminary practices as not so important, so significant, and they might think that the preliminary practices are something to be done for the new disciples, the new practitioners. But that's really not the case at all. And we need to practice it really from the very beginning until we attain enlightenment. It's really a kind of a condition in our practice that has to be complete.
Loma sapa ke ngipat tene Ngondro ni ngochona nyamni chigora loma ningba ke tene Ngondro de teng sapo chi nyamselang ne tene tatab chapsang ki tene ha ko thoya tene chago yores.
And so of course that the new practitioners, the new disciples, they surely also need to begin their practice with the preliminary practices, but also to the older, the senior disciples, for them, it is also a very profound point for them to gain a deeper understanding of the view and the practice.
Train lama tamji karisung kurisina ngarang song kangba tawo ji jago na tene mundo de kangba ka mai mando na gire sungudos mando de yapo cha timbo cha na tene chirang kangba ki jang zo yang ya la ya tene kawa zo ya tene pen kangba thoga ja ya chama pen thoga ni sum chira ka che jan tene kangba de pe timbo yang go yore sungudos de 마기 팀보 메나 지난 칸바 토가 장데 간든 잡고지 이나야 마기 팀보 메서 팀 칸바데 베 삐체 단데는 칸바데 팀보 메네더니 마 셰유야 그더니 니카 땡땡 요러 왔어 데인데 데는 가서 단 칸바 베야는 칸바 치레 바세도 칸바 잔데 베나더니 세야 특세야 보자죠 데는 칸바야 토자 가게 자고는 데니 디나기 마기 들더니 차리요는 마기데 팀보 세고도 왔어 삐디나기 링아란서 쳐도글로 추 Nyamni si in the Tara Saja Chimbo, the Zopa Chimbo, so pay Nyamni Yapo Chagona, Tama you mundo de Yapo Chago Yores. Martin Humbo de Mundo de Yapo Machana, Chiran Saja Chimbo, Zopa Chimbo, Yapo Chagami, but Penatan Kamba Pena it is. Kamba Mangi Timbo Mena, Chiran Kamba Tozanga, Chuba Casejana, Kamba de Yapo Chagio Maravas, Petina he, Chirantini Mundo de Nipat de Pe, marketing Mundo say at the Karimba. Ngondro junong kareimba Ngondro nyani mangi te timbo jinga khakone teni ti teni teni ngag ya yetane teni sakin zokchin la sopa goya chene teni yako chabiyo res
So normally when the various lamas give instructions, teachings on the preliminaries, they say that it's similar to the foundation of a building. If you want to construct a building, then first you need to have a firm foundation, and that foundation are the preliminary practices. So if you want to have a good building, then you first must have a good foundation, and then on top of that, then you can, when you have that, then you can also construct the walls and the pillars and the different floors, like this first and second and third floor, and so on. And then the whole building becomes stable. But so if the foundation is not stable in the beginning, then no matter how stable your wall or your floor might be, it certainly is there's a great danger that the building will collapse, that it won't be a stable building at all. So that's why when we construct a building, we first make a plan. We measure the buildings and we think how many stories, how many floors do I need, and so on, so that it becomes really stable. And so similarly, when we practice the Dharma, in order for us to practice, for example, Mahamudra or Dzogchen well, we must have a good foundation of the preliminary practices. Because if that is not firm, then our practices of Mahamudra and Dzogchen will also not become so firm. So it's just like the construction of a building. And then once you have a firm foundation, you can construct however many floors you want, 5 or 10 floors and so on. But in order to be able to do that, you surely need to have a good foundation. And so once you understand that, once you have that firm foundation, then you can improve on top of that foundation. If you have that foundation, then your practices of Mahamudra and Dzogchen will really become stable practices.
Rengas Nyamni, Lobjong Sia, Saking Adin Munros, Saking Adin Munros, and Karesongo Yoresenas, Tachiran Saja Chimbunamni, Sigionas, Sigo Yona, Teni take Mund Nadin Mundo, Nadin Yamni, Maze, Huna Chiran, Mundo Yamni Chigores. Mundo Yamnis and Tin Lamra Park in the Yanrogo Yores. Then Nadin and it's all Karayon Goresena, Mansotara. Yadam Kla Goya, Tini Lama Namjo Goya, Saja Chimbo Goya, Tesore. Takora Ujung Mamate Tesore. Teso Yamni Siala, Tambotini, Mundo Tingi Patnogo Yores. The Mundo de Masoma Yena, Tenichina Kato, Yadam Kla Yamnisena, Yana Lama Namjo Gomna, Yana Chira Sakin Gomna. Karayena and Tin Jumjed Yapo, Tomata in the Yungu Yores. The lake at the Rene Yensibari Yapo Chasigima, Jung Chani. The Nikoramba in the Maju Sadu, ko Pise the Yapo Chagio Mares. Benana Namjunga and the Chido, Pata de River, Mundo to Sohida, Sachimbo Majeviche, Kazi Mundo Tess Lobjonda, Nyamnindo, Chena, Chin Tarsimba Mazevich, this Tondaro Chita, the Nia Nyamni Yaposhida Majeviche, the Ninga Namju Pe La Yadam La Pen Lamik Jude, Pena Colo Dem Chotave. Dorje Pamotav, Samakla, Nimakla, Pena, Dorji Yuna, Prapa Dorji Yuna Tav, Jambar Shinji Shitav, Pe Chotogola, Netsen Tombo, to Solatin Lamsang, to Solan Yamnesia, Gozo, Tene to so nyamni chiki yorwas. Tenge nori ke la ku yo mari te yena china ma yiri timbo mi tsadi sinati katsen jugu yo ha ko mundo as. Ta ngana so namju tendu yungo do ape nang wang shi ba yin yena nyamni shida ha ko mundo yena nge chirim shida ha ko mundo rewa to so kare ri rewa ya nge saja chimbo tri shi ba yin saja chimbo gomi ya po ha ko mundo kanti chi gori 세야 들이 연구도 깨자데 내체도 뺀 토보든 저거다 에코 뺀는 여당 거는 뺄라미기 유대 요는미나 토히되니 마케지 저거다 냠니 공부되는 사자지 뭐 뺀내체 토보든 어떻게 되시고요 와스 이나 마이 준 로요 마다 마이 준이 마선사티 다에 통보도 희에 대바 얘나 되는 거는 좀 되다 되는 하 고야다 두수 때서 제 배때서 지름도 때서 하 고장 주어마 생고 주를 추다 이제야 라틴이 배틴디 저도걸로 셔다 주 추담 제 말하고 던지지 드는 강가리 드니 제 추나니게 라마 드니게 여당거 라 잡고 라마의 첸 라마의 유로 또 솔르드니 록다지야 또 홍홍그 유로 와서 그래서 마기가 약고 차트요 말이스 문도 약고 마치 세드니 중도서 중고 요래 때인데 여당거 라 통봉하게 냠는 지거나 인지 민지 홍로도 고고 홍로서야 더 소냠네서야 홍로도야 그 람람찌리 되요레스 배는 알아서 지된다 우리 따라 빼지 차이나 나자 자카가 신신치기 자카고 신론치기 세는 야 랑거여와 야 랑이나 야 내체 희원데 가래면서 요 말에 내체 희원데 갈 말음 진다 당분이 봤음밖에 말 희원데면서 요 말에 야람 파이도 야 플롭병세네 저선 로요 말에 얘네야 내체 히라미나야 오 나페나 토론 robra chim gegin chigi 로 나페 쳐도글로 총례게 내가 침보 던저기 chigi 다 두쪽 빼 믹사데 네 빼는 거는 내빼 찌듯이 기거다 돈데 말아서 카톡 따라 사제지 뭐 곰자야 라비야 카톡 말아서 따라 여당글라 빼 라미그 주데서 나는 냠니 신도야데 단 너드는 빼 딘디 차거 나기 희원 내체데 나 저저 말음 진다 니바선바는 로드 요래데 얘네 나 저저 걸 내가 된가 신진의 신용 지gin이와 토론 로브라 지금 기긴 지긴 라고로 다삐 대로 지 찬도 그래서 다 주랑 야진 잡다 얘네 지랑 내가 지 투자를 왜 존사를 왜로와 지랑 빼는 토론 로브라 지금 기긴 야 지랑 진 잡다 왜 지나 기긴 진 로피 나이지는 로 투자를 지랑 희원데 내체 용어도 왜 쓰러와 내체 요 말아봤어 내체 미치도 지랑 그 내가 드 두고 말아봤어 빼대나기는 나기는 파기는 마성 차드 다중 대답이 차이 보여레스 대용문으로서야 돼 개침부터 대선은 좁은 집에서 쭉 우여야죠 문으로 삽선에 내가 친구 쏜 거야 좀 시티든 차고요레스
And so now the practice that we are engaging in is related to the Mahamudra practice. It's called the preliminaries to the fivefold path of Mahamudra. And so why is it called that way? Because if you want to engage in the practice of Mahamudra, the fivefold path of Mahamudra, then that must be preceded first by the practice of the preliminaries. So you have to practice in stages like that. And the main part of this fivefold path is to practice the Yidam deity, to practice the Guru Yoga, and then to practice Mahamudra. That's the actual main part. And for that main part, you need to have the preliminary practices. If you neglect that and you start to practice the Yidam deity directly, or for example, you practice the Guru Yoga or Mahamudra directly, you will not have a firm foundation. Maybe it's possible that there are some for whom that is possible, but generally speaking, our practice then will not really become of any good quality. So that is why normally the preliminary practices are so important. So often what we do is we don't really consider that preliminaries are so important, and we just move on to the highest practices, even though we have not really completed the preliminary practices. We have little understanding of the practice, and we go right to the top where we practice. I practice the Yidam deity of the highest tantras. For example, in the new tantras, you practice the Chakasambara or Vajrayogini, or if you practice it according to the old tantras, you may practice Vajrakilaya or Yamantaka. So you start out right with some really high practices without ever having really established a foundation. And so I'm not saying that this is generally something wrong, but the thing is that if your foundation is not really strong, then it's really a bit questionable how many blessings will really enter your mind and how deep your understanding of that practice really is. So often people say that, I have received such and such an empowerment, the highest tantras, but I don't really know actually how to do the practice. And I don't really know how to practice that visualization, the generation stage. Or you might say, I've received teachings on Mahamudra, but I don't really understand how to practice it. So people ask really questions from a really high level, but they really lack the foundation actually. So we speak about the Yidam deities of the highest tantras, or we speak about practicing Mahamudra, but we have not actually completed the preliminary practices. And so then it is now questionable whether or not we will gain a real result and a real understanding. Now we might have a little understanding of the deity yoga of the generation stage, but it will not really become completely integrated into our mind stream. And so then when we enter a dharma, follow a lama, or we practice all sorts of wrathful deities and so on, it may happen then that we develop wrong views if we lack this foundation of a preliminary. So that's the fault that then can arise. And so therefore, if you want to practice a Yidam deity of the highest tantras, then you definitely need to have the preliminaries in place. So you have to practice in these stages. For example, it's like when you say, I'm going to become the president of the country. And so actually, even though you're putting yourself up in that position, you don't actually know how to really do that. Maybe you have completed the first or the second elementary class, but you haven't really done any further studies. So you don't really know what you actually have to do. Or for example, if you say, I'm going to be a university professor, or I'm going to be a great businessman. This is similar to just going directly into the practices of Mahamudra and the Yidam deity of the highest tantras. So it's just like basically you've completed maybe the first or the second class of the elementary school, but you haven't really completed your studies. And so then you stand up and say, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to be a university professor. Will you really be able to do that? How will that work out for you? Can you really be a professor at the university? Do you really have that kind of knowledge? So you don't really have that level of practice, so you can't really do the job. So that's because you have not gone through the whole process of all the stages. And so that's why the preliminaries are so important. And that's also why Thigten Sumgön had said, to me, the preliminary practices are more profound than the main part practices. So there's a very significant meaning, a deep meaning for saying that, a reason for saying that.
Oh yeah, that Thomas the Chama getting kono da jang ki chimbores ta tren ngaran so nga ding hunro nyamni ji indu lobjong ji indu tene nge lobjong yapo ji go ngaran kokap zambon de je tene tene lobjong yapo ji ne simchi thamje gi chi dang lobjong da lobjong ji ne tene nge nyamnin ji ne simchi thamjing ko wa da dong ha le tab la nga zhongguo sam tene kono number taba kono sancho sembe ji sim go ne tene ninja de hachang ka chimbores tene ngarang so pena dedu tambo pe mambo tambo ngarang tonang ro si tes tai yang je exciting ro si ne o ta te pe ka chu de sa pan ro chi ri do ro wa me san ro chi yin sa de ngarang nyam ju chi gin sam tene nyam yu si yo ka ble tene chu shen de tene o chi pan ro chi ri do sam san ro chi tene kon tha ma chi we che tene a pa ro ne tene 용고 도와서 던데 제는 되는 아 테스트 정보를 던데 많이 봐. 그러면 고 쪼와 나이 세네 되는 제 타치고 삼베더니 공룡 대응이 받고. 되는 공룡도 요나 되는 받치 띵띵 지추 들럽병 세네마 탈신야라 받치 용용요레스. 대마도 되는 제 되는 아 진냠 요세 테스트 제 도난로지 엑사이트지 아 사니 칼레 야 테스마 타농로지 던데 쇼트 던데 용고요로 와서 던데 많이 베징에 법병도 빼 ngochoni ten ta ya buji jigo samdeng ngara kokap zang buji yin kaba zang buji yin samne teni kage zho yin de teni nge lobbyong de jigo semji tamji ge chi de sa tendu samno tan teni kono teni go res.
In the beginning, it's very important to cultivate the right motivation. So now we are going to think that I have this excellent opportunity to study and to learn about the preliminaries to the fivefold path of Mahamudra. I'm going to learn this for the benefit of all sentient beings so that I can liberate them from samsara. So it's very important to cultivate a motivation of bodhicitta, and with that, then really engage in a practice with enthusiasm. So maybe often we first think that we're kind of interested and really excited about it, and we think that's a new thing, a new teaching. It must be really special. I'm going to join this teaching. And then once you've joined it, you may feel, oh, it's all the same. And then you might just forget about it again, not really complete it. So this is not how you should approach that. But once you have started it, you should certainly have the motivation thinking that I'm going to bring that to completion. And if you have such a motivation, then you will also experience fewer obstacles in the completion of your Dharma practice. So therefore, when you engage in this practice, think that today I'm going to do this, and not thinking that, oh, today I'm excited about it, I'm doing it, but maybe tomorrow it's already gotten a little boring, and then you don't do it. So certainly you need to have a good motivation, thinking that I'm very fortunate, and therefore I'm going to take this chance to start it, and I will bring it to completion. And so in this way, you should engage in this with great joy and enthusiasm, and thinking that I'm doing this, I'm going to bring this to completion for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Ngondro tri dharma katu shalom shipateni ins.
So the instructions on the preliminaries to the fivefold path of Mahamudra today will be based on the Dharmakirti Shalom, which are the oral instructions by Dharmakirti.
Ate jotang saja chimbo ngadi shipate ngana so ta chu chu pungbo je che che dong se ge dan dor de na dong ha ni ning bon ro cho du ne tene te damba tene ngai na cho du ya ba tenri singa din se ndo ha ni so song jun ni ti damba kansa jing ban sang je wala ni yalam de ba cha sang ji yu de ba tel ni sak chinga din ta ti ju ba lo ji xian na ju ba de ngan so ju ba cho sim de yang se ge ju ba sim de yang se ge dan do de na ka sa cho song de yang se ge re ta country se na teni chuko dorjen chani marampa chini teni telo naro mapa mala teni gampo pani ma ju yomba tela teni nyamni sila ku juba sige yore samha ki juba tinan rogo ta ta ndolo ni ju onjo tela ngana so samo taji de tawa juba te jachin chupi juba se juba ni she yongo re ta tikhingi juba te ni de tara atakhani tsor ju ne teni yang gampo pala tsor tara ngana so atakhani che kadampa ni che teni tsor gampo pala ju de patela teni tikhinge tarap chachang teji sur ju den dolo ge teni tikhinge tarap chang sur gampo palto ta marmani ma sur gampo palto do den gampo pala teni kasa cho ni ri yan sigyo re do ha ni ri yan sigyo re do den damba thamji teni je gampo pala chundu teni gampo pa ke teni te tabo teni nyams lang ne teni khong loma thamche la ma ti minga de chachang ti yong te tarap den nga su ka ju ge tarap se roa kaju ju pas tene tinani tene tumong mai batene gambo pa hloma hlopchin tene rongum phamu chupa ke tene tumong mai batene sakchin ngadin hiya hipan tene chor ngo chu pare ta nyamni chod dodo ngo chong de tene te rong chop ti hloma rong chopan jikte sung ge tene te ngo se chor nyams lang ne tene pha chapar se go ra ta hloma tamjin pha te chapar se ne tene si se tene ti ngading chulan rubong ngading men koran rubong ngading te cha so res ta ngading se du ambo sajo ju sen tene yadam kala lama namjo saja chimbo jong hoa ting atel ngading se ta tin chu thamji yana nam ya chama chon du de batel ngading ta te ta chu nyam se lempar sipala tene te ngro tela tene sakchin ngading hunros te trenga sakchin ngading hunro nyami chigo ta ngading hunro rawa po de sri senas ta rampa yin de tene mandong chopani rong kaju gnan ju de tene pachet dinra chobji chuk khande yin nga sa po ting mo do renzin chu je takpa se tara 장군 충상의 공청 담보를 하장의 계급 침보지 송아리 렌지 치다 대가 로마텔더니 로콘 좀 틀린 남자를 시바 드니 로콘 좀 틀린 남자를 드니 랑게 짜블라마 드니 렌지 추지 잡바 송的这생리了다다 마카 추셰데 드니 생리 전에 다면 요텔라 따라 드니 다마크 샬론스 다마크도 세바데 렌지 추자 괜찮지 샬론스는 대가 송야버드니 송的这생리了다면 다 tellatini sakchin ngadin sindri ngadin hunro hiba 다 대들은 티나는 거 마셔요 res 단 너들은 롱 가지고 hunro 탐지에 나니 때 hunro 예시 탱 담보 마이 토니 때 잡치슈레스 다른 hunro 정말 콩텔 두고요 res
So now regarding the fivefold path of Mahamudra now, so generally, we have the lineage of that. Generally, we speak about the 84,000 different Dharma teachings of the Buddha, and the essence of all these teachings is subsumed in the sutras and the tantras. And this fivefold path is the essence of all these sutras and the tantras. And the fivefold path of Mahamudra is a complete path of basis, path, and result leading to enlightenment. It's an all-inclusive path, this fivefold path of Mahamudra. And in terms of the lineage, it is a lineage that it's either considered to be like sutras and the tantras both, or it is the threefold lineage of the secret mantra, and then the view and the conduct. And so, first of all, the first lineage is the lineage of blessings, or the Vajrayana lineage, which derives from the Dharmakaya Vajradhara and was transmitted down to Tilopa, Marpa, Milarepa, and Gampopa, and so on. And then there is the lineages of the sutras, which consists of two, the profound view lineage and the vast conduct or action lineage. And that is the lineage according to the Mahayana. And that was passed down through the Kadampa lineage through Atisha to Gampopa. So in this way, Gampopa also had received the Mahayana tradition, as well as the tantric tradition from Marpa, Milarepa, and so on. So therefore, Gampopa is really the place where all the lineages converge. And so he possesses the lineages of the sutras and the tantras, and also these three lineages. And so now Gampopa then himself passed down these teachings to his own disciples, and in this way it was passed down through the Kagyu lineages. And now especially regarding these teachings, one of his greatest disciples was Parmo Drupa. And Parmo Drupa was really the one who began this kind of the layout of the fivefold path of Mahamudra, who really put it together in a way that one can actually engage in its practice. And then Parmo Drupa had a disciple, Chigden Sumgan. And so through Chigden Sumgan, this concept of the fivefold path of Mahamudra was then laid out in a very practical way. And this is how Chigden Sumgan then had transmitted it to his own disciples. And so then later it was passed down in this way through the Jikun Kagyu lineage, and it was therefore given the name, the fivefold path of Mahamudra according to the Jikun Kagyu lineage. And so this fivefold path consists of the practice of bodhicitta, the yidam deity, guru yoga, Mahamudra, and dedication. So it's an all-inclusive path. And what we are practicing now are the preliminaries to this fivefold path. And so the person who composed this text, so the lineage goes back to Lord Chigden Sumgan. And now in the Jikun Kagyu lineage, we have something like 18 or 19 throne holders. And the first one was Rinzin Chögye Dragpa, and that is Dharmakirti. And that was also the first incarnation of His Holiness Chungtsang Rinpoche. And he was a real incredible scholar and the master. And he had a disciple, so Dharmakirti had a disciple with the name Lo Gujok Chilin Namgyal. So he was the disciple. His root guru was Rinzin Chögye Dragpa, and we also call him Dharmakirti. And so this text is actually consists of notes written by the disciple Ngondro Namgyal, based on the instructions that he had received from his root guru Dharmakirti. And so then these notes by the disciple are then called the oral instructions of Dharmakirti, or the Dharmakirti Shalom. And so of these, we begin with the preliminary practices today, the Ngondro to the within the Dharmakirti Shalom. And actually, the Dharmakirti Shalom, the preliminary practices in the Jikun Kagyu lineage is the most elaborate preliminary practice, and also it's the first really widely spread text on this topic that has been actually put into writing. So this is the preliminary practices that we are going to discuss.
Tara sakhi nga din se ya te tara ngarang so ta kaju koma chama lam digi tene nyams lang ne tene topa topu yores pena kaju ka marma taksum tan rong chopa ta Dona Tatanga, Lama Parda, Tene Son de Petini, Kajuka Lama Tamje, Tini Lam de Nyams Lame, Tene Trapatoba Shata Chagures, Tene Chun the Hatyanka Silap Chimbo, Go Lelao, Nyan Lin Devo, Tene Chepat and Papu Chagures. Tene dirt up Tene Ngondro, Tangadin Hundro, dirt up Sinjil in the Papo, Tene. Fontrele namjaina hajang kepa chimbo nyamning ke tarun thombo pesanji machep chip chimbo res.
So this is the path, the fivefold path of Mahamudra is really in essence the path that all the past Kagyu masters have practiced, and on the basis of that they have attained accomplishment. For example, Marpa Milarepa and Gambopa and all the Kagyu masters really have practiced this and have attained accomplishment. And so this Dharma has really great blessings, and it is easily understood, and also it is very simple to practice it. It is a very special Dharma. And so the one who wrote down these notes, the author, Lochen Namgyam, he himself really was an incredible and inconceivable master, with a great scholar and a master with the highest accomplishments.
Oh yeah, saja chimbo ngadin che tiji sindi dorjin chang dharma kata shalong ki sawa se tin sinje. Tene lama ta lapala la samsalo sonin taso sijin chingwa kongle chor yinla dundin dorji kanyin chingpa ta tsewe oka dirzaling da rapshawe. Mareng moso tabo kajun namlandu tusum jarwe timpe tabo tamchu kong. Samo lamcho namba ngadi de kardin namdo lingden tize pong gompon rugong pate kusan sar dorjin changen patin sara hingde jesu chuji chapa hin zamlen kheda chapa yang jesu nyumara yang usum tolandu se ta te tambo gongden chin de ji de cha de ni zamba bo rani je de ni lama ta de ni lama tang chele de ni kusan sara to solo tu pa pya o tendri dos.
So the text begins first with the name, the title. So as we said, it's the oral instructions by the or notes to the based on the oral instructions of the Vajradhara Dharmakirti on the fivefold path of Mahamudra. And so the first few verses here in the text, which is only here in Tibetan, is an homage that the author writes to his own root guru and all the lineage gurus. So he prostrates, he bows down to the lineage gurus, and he praises them.
Nyumura yang ozu tongten do chuji lekso nyuma wazi jing idung pechar je panzai pa chu dalo dangsu chu la chakhe sa nyamba tsudal yugi lamde per so ta kongke tsawa lama teni jepson rinji chi chachapa teni song yapa teni minga tamje tsu nyingbo dune teni kongke tsur gang kowa te tsur teni yikto la mangu gui yin sene ta tsampat tamja wari dos.
And then there are some verses which are the commitment to complete the composition of this text. And so the author is saying that, so these are my notes that I took, and which include the essence of the instructions, the essential instructions of the root guru Dharmakirti.
당에 때 이게 때 저당은 시엔도 제 돈다데 마시에 yana 이게 때 잡상 말로는 제 세면다데 양 카시게 때 롱고 제용 차도더니 이게 때 아마 로요게 인시 로요 당더니 바로 해야 된데 지금 인시.
So the way I'm going to teach on these texts, and so for the most part, I'm going to read through the text and then summarize the meaning of it. But there are some quotations in there that I'm going to actually as in spell out like very directly and completely to you. So the reason for doing it that way is because that way you receive the instructions and the reading transmission, the long together.
산제 탐지 주주바 집 람초 운동화 땡지 탐지 징모 좀데데 도전 창진 비트 다다 파트 냠도 냠냠도 또바 주마 집 당화 가주는 뭐지 라마나 제번로 오고 파파모트 받든지 뜻은 용고 뭐야 제 투지 니까 까와도 딘바 간사 체질 산진 운도 싶이 녀라 사제지 뭔가딘 추중 콜론 고완제바 차히장 로드지 첩반한지 신지스 쿠바 돌로 돈 남바 니데송 단 도나츠 가레송도 세나다 산지 탐지 당아 산지 곰판 토벌시바 데시고다 산지 탐지 주바치 블람 세나 당한데 바 산지 탐지 로블람 로슬람 데네 마오바 산지 탐지 안 로슬람 다다르 요드 산지 탐지 근 로슬람 도나 도주 그 띵지 탐지지 닝고 좀딘데 도진 창진보네 냠도 또베 주마 체베 데네 당아 가주 rumbo체다 너데나 가주 라마 남지 데네 냠니 닝거 데네 체바데 데네 공포 파모트바다 종 직디송고 얍세데 툭 닝거 까딘 까바데 딘바세나 당아랑 수체 너다베 출레 냠니 당업용시베 데네 까바데 딘발 고레 까바데 딘바 가자 탐지 데네 체직도 데네 산제도 모두 시벌시벌 치플 녀람세나 다 람데 베 타니오 산제 콤파 토벌시벌 타니오 사제치 몽아딘 사제치 몽아딘 오원제 단도 데네 띵아딘데 데네 콩게 서신 닝컨도 저 센디레 따암데 데네 텔라 냠니 시야라 돈 남바니 유시 냠스레야 텔라 링탑 텔라
So this is the path. So in the text it says, then this is the path that leads. It is the path that leads to enlightenment. It is the path whereby all the Buddhas have attained enlightenment. All the Buddhas of the past. This is the path of all the past Buddhas, and it is the path of all the future Buddhas. It is the path of all the present Buddhas. It is the essence of all the sutras, the tantras, and their commentaries. It is the path transmitted through Vajradhara and through the close lineage, also close because it leads to enlightenment is very close. It is the heart essence, heart essential practice of all the Kagyu lamas, in particular the heart essence of the father and his son, Pamo Drupa and Lord Jigjen Sungen. And it is the close path for all the fortunate Dharma practitioners to attain enlightenment within a single lifetime. So that is the path of the fivefold path of Mahamudra. And so the author is saying, I'm writing down these notes that contain the heart essence, contains the heart essence of this entire path. And so the path here is divided into 2 points.
다 대답더니 고만한 짓더니 사자치 봉아딘 거는 추중 콜로 자침보 고완제 베티나네더니 철 센디지 답이알더니 담바 남바 돈 남바 니요 돈 남바 니데 되니 류진네 다 셈진네 네니 류네데 셈네니 디나나더니 만두고요서
So in brief, so he's saying that this fivefold path of Mahamudra is kind of summarizes, brings into these notes the vast Dharma teachings, the wheels of Dharma that have been turned, and summarizes them into 2 points and key points. And these are, the first one is the key points of the body, and then the key point of the mind.
Tela ta tambo lune de senne ni le tambo luje ne nes luje ne te teni tambo wimpe nes teni dewar tin la denes wimpe ne le teni ngana de ne teni dewar de ne teni kampa dorji chotong gatsek sang pongba jang rimba yi zango la ni nyam ya che kin en le jar me na se pade nam nang ke chudun da dimbar saos ta te ma chirang ke namju yin don manju bo song de sarate nam nang chudun do de na nga ke ne win pa la do de ne win pa yin ari so sun khang ba yin ari kawa de gu yona sigor kawa de gu yona chu nyam ni si de ni ma zu po te lu lu se ne de nam nang chudun se ne de go yo res ta nam nang chudun se ya de dang ngarang so chu se chu nyamni si se de bayu pa chi cha go ta bayu jinshi bayu se chi do namju ngarang so zubo ma thang de ba yin da ma nyin du go yin da chi zubo go chulam lu go chulam de ka du na ko ba mi ba mangbo yong go yo was tene ba mi wang de ma song ba ta lu nam nang chu dan de dim bang an do go zong de lu bayu ba cha go ta 저당 코로나 남남 추동의平庸的저现在就炸的long堂的送着他忙不送个人因为东大出都对那还绿的把有把掐过把有把掐的这里南南去东西呢这里嘛的他本来是等到去年里去说标识个有了他让去说标识个有的这里俺去说标识个有上代是做过的南就那意思呢嘛叫做个就旁边俺嘛一把但是就도로 nga zabzam ro chi chi bayu pa chi lu de ni bayu pa chi ta te ta de nyam ne chi bayu de la de nam na chu de da dim par chi go re so de la ta lu ji ne es jo da nga so lu ne to so gom de ja to so tri de ne ga yo re so go re pe na nga ge lu zhang na za zhang da za zhang na long zhang na sem de ni ne ge yo re s to so ya pin yo 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 re s
So first are the key points of the body of those 2. And so it begins with saying that first you should isolate yourself to a place of seclusion and then sit there on a comfortable seat in the crossed legged Vajra posture. And so now what comes is a list called the 7-point posture of Vairocana, which are the key points of the body. So first you sit in a crossed-legged posture, and then you have your back, your spine straight, and your shoulders are expanded, and your neck is slightly tucked in, and your 2 hands are in a gesture in the position of meditation, and your tongue touches the palate of your mouth, and your eyes gaze toward the tip of your nose. So these 7 points are called the 7 points of Vairocana, which are the key points of the body. And so the reason for doing that is that, so first of all, it begins with this isolated place. It can be any place, wherever. It could also be your home. So you are in your place on your seat and you're assuming the 7-point posture of Vairocana. And the reason for assuming such a posture is because in order to practice the Dharma, such a posture is conducive for mindfulness, for practicing mindfulness and heedfulness. So normally when whatever we do, whether we are sitting on the ground or we're lying down, so we often fall into a state of unmindfulness in our physical activities with our bodies. And so when we assume this 7-point posture of Vairocana, it supports our mindfulness. Because this it's also related to our channels and winds. And so think that now today I'm going to practice the Dharma, and so therefore having this motivation to begin with also means that you are focusing and you're being mindful, and therefore naturally your body should not be just in a kind of loose or unmindful kind of state. So we have to be a little heedful, careful also when it comes to our body. And for that sake, we assume the 7-point posture, Vairocana. And also it generally has a very profound point to this posture, because it is said that when your body is straight, then your channels are straight. And when your channels are straight, then the winds can flow smoothly, and then the mind can abide still. So that is the reason why it is necessary to assume such a physical posture.
Ne nipa tela kudon samde ngondro wat nguyutan jiso son tara tat ne tambo te luchun doctor imba namna kudon ande ne seya tela nenga yore la botan dordina kyu nyamne seya la tene nenga nyamne rumde to ya la nenga tendu tene nenga se te kichin bolo karena tendu ta ne nipa tela tene 주동 섬 돈친 섬 요도 돈친 섬데 돈치 당보도 문조 니바데 우유 세데 나딘 코란 쳐거요 되니 이 지소스 지데 뭐 대차야 고요레스텔
And so then that's the first point. And so the second point is divided into 3 points, 3 sections, and that these 3 are the preliminaries, the main part, and the conclusion. So there's 2 key points of the body and key points of the mind. And this term key point is also used because it is like an essential, a vital, a crucial point for our Dharma practice. It is vital for us to practice these points in order to attain a result. So anything that's vital or crucial or key is something that's very important. And so the 7-point posture are the 7 points of the body are the key points, the vital points of the body. And then the second are the vital points of the mind. And so that one is divided into 3 sections, which are the preliminaries, the main part practice, and the main part practice being then the 5-fold path of Mahamudra itself, and then the conclusion, which is the dedication.
subject tambo subject nipa subject samba se so yong yore ti zon chi rido ten de test che kare labu do samyan da yong sa andang no tache do mangpo ji yong do te yin na ya te tache do la yang khon kha de chin mangpo yong de chin de gu ba jim chi so yong yore es ta kudun samba don chin tambo mondo te la teni dechin teni tambo tela ngondro tel dechin sumyos tel dechin sumde tambo de tumong ke ngondro tumong mai pe ngondro chepar ji ngondro tel dechin sum yobodos.
So the way this text is presented also is a traditional format, which means there is a lot of kind of lists and divisions and subdivisions. So it follows the old tradition of you have a point, and then that point has a subdivision and so forth. So there's also a purpose for laying it out that way. It also follows the tradition. So you might wonder, like, what's with all these subdivisions? So there's a significance to that. So it follows the tradition. And so again, the first one, the points of the body, we said the first one is the preliminary practices. And so the preliminary practices themselves are divided into three subdivisions, 3 points. So there are the common preliminaries, the uncommon preliminaries, and the special preliminaries.
담보 드네 투몽 기 홍조 홍조 telaya yang khran la desin ye yong dos tela thomar tini chen de la ngumbar himbe nimbola tini damjor himba kawa sambate tanga 투몽 기 홍조 나니 담보치 니바테 nyomle tan leli nimbola chowa mata pa sambachi Somebody tini tamjo julu tong yupa sabasa le jumjela sambas. Yepa tini sipi dewa la dewan zimpi nimpo la korwe nimek sambata iya sitate tara tumo kuhundo tela tini nasi ki. Ta ngana su namjuwe na lodo namba iya si. Tendu sungku yores. Lodo namba iya sayante ngana su ta tsendala hincha yorwa. Tsendala hincha yondu Kare chene tsendele hincha yore se na ngubo nelo ngomate jimsi ngomate nga su mashi pare nga so mashi tsate tini nga so namju mata pala takpan jins mada pala takpan jins matsang wala tsangwan jins made wala dewan jins ya ta nga so chursonga riwan daw dina chursonga tini che tsendele hatyang ke takpalan jin de pa dewalan jinde pa ta to nga so upo ne chama hidin di de ta ba chen nga so jine tini hin cha che de yores ta lodo namgyo se ya te ki kare jing gor se lodo namgi de upo ne se de ngama de kare ri se nang ko upo ne se de de ri da se ma nga so ngo pru shi ta o ta ti tini nga so ko lodo na ba yo lob jong se pa de ki tini ta nga rang ko ne se ngama de shi ngor 코네츠 ngomati hin디 o ngone 코아세가 동하지랑 이리도 사면 공원에 그런 거 내로 그럼 저저걸로 내가 강연 먼저 왔어 가르치는 거 참만 따버랑 이리도 왔어 참만 동하지랑 이리도 왔어 근데 대 나는 거 내로 대답지 하고인데 오 되는 나기 신차데 파빵네 신차데 로쳐 돈로다 신차데 빵마데 로도 신데 바데 로돈로 왔어 Tini teki nyingla ta lodo namba years. Nga su tumongi ngondro yang, segyo tumongi ngondro sena, pena nga su nangba, doa nangba. Pena tikpa chimbo, tikpa chunga, tikpa ringbo osi, tikpa chichong, nga su shegi doa osi. Tikpa chichong tsangma ki tini, maa yin rawo te, tumongi ngondro ye teki tini, tsangma ki lobyon ti tini, tini, sanji chi kompang tobar si bala. Ti tini lobyon sina ya, ta koru dongali tatablan begi yoresi. 데 참마 택바 투몽게 되니 참마게 냠니 로병 조세야 인디 된 택바 투몽 홍로 양식이 요레스
The first one we have said is the common preliminary practices. And the common preliminary practices consist of 4 points. So these we normally call also, and so the first one is the reflection on the difficulty of finding a human body, which is an antidote to the attachment, the clinging attachment to this life. The second one is the reflection on death and impermanence, which is an antidote to like sluggishness and laziness, or indolence and laziness. The third one is the reflection on karma, cause and effect. And that is in order to make this human body, this human existence meaningful. And then the fourth one is the reflection on the shortcomings of samsara, which is an antidote to the grasping at the happiness of samsaric existence. So normally we call these the four thoughts that turn the mind. And so these are the common preliminaries. And we practice them, we reflect on them because we have a strong attachment to this life. And why are we attached to this life? It is because we do not really understand, we do not really know the true nature of things. So not knowing how things really are, we believe in the permanence of something that's impermanent. And we think that something is pure or good, but it's actually suffering. Or we think that something is dirty, but it's actually clean, but it's actually dirty, and so on. So basically, we confuse in a state of delusion in our life. We think that this life is so stable and permanent, and we think that we can find some happiness here. And that's the confusion. We don't know how things really are, and that's why we are attached to it. And so the four thoughts that turn the mind introduce us to the true nature of samsara. And so learning about that, we know how samsara really is, and then we realize that actually samsara is really only suffering. There is no happiness to be found anywhere. Everything is impermanent, and everything has the nature of suffering all the time. So this is what we recognize. And when we recognize that, then we will turn away from our attachment to this life. And so this turning away is the purpose of those
Let me just jump in here. Hi, Ina. Can you hear me? Because we can't hear you right now. All right, so I think we lost Ina. Ina is currently out of this Zoom session. Rinpoche, do we want to wait a little while for Ina to come back?
Okay, 1 minute, okay?
Okay, she's back. Yeah, let's just wait for her to see what she says.
Need patience, you know.
Ina, can you hear us? You are on mute now. Can you try to unmute and speak, please?
이나처럼 make the 까기도.
Yeah, it doesn't look too good because she actually logged in and then was logged out again.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I don't know what happened. How far did we get? So talk about the vehicles. Did you hear that? Or did
I think,
does
Ina,
anybody know where I was cut off?
yeah, could you please just
Yeah.
repeat from this entire part? Could you
From the
please have,
beginning? Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, so the first one of these four is the reflection on the difficulty of finding a precious human body, which is the antidote to the attachment to this life. Second is the reflection on death and impermanence, which is an antidote to sluggishness and laziness. And third is the reflection on karma, cause and effect, which is the antidote, or kind of makes this human life meaningful. And the fourth one is the reflection on the shortcomings of samsara, which is an antidote to the attachment to the happiness of samsaric existence. And so we are introduced to these four thoughts that turn the mind because of our attachment to this life. And the reason we are attached to this life is because we don't really know its true nature. So we believe that this life is permanent when actually it is impermanent. Or we think that there is some happiness when there is only suffering. Or we think that there is something good or pure to be found when actually it is not. So this is the confusion, the state of delusion we are in. So we are confused and thinking that there is some permanence to this life and there is some happiness into this life. So because of not knowing how things really are, we are attached to it. And so the four thoughts that turn the mind introduce us to the true nature of samsara. And so when we learn about that, then we begin to understand how things really are. And then you realize that actually samsara is only suffering. There is no happiness here. Everything is impermanent. Everything has the nature of suffering. So when you realize that how things really are, you will turn away from your attachment to this life. And so that's what we call the four thoughts that turn the mind. And they are also called the common preliminary practices because they are practiced commonly in all the different Buddhist vehicles. So we speak about the greater vehicle like the Mahayana and the lesser vehicle and different intermediate vehicles. There's all kinds of different vehicles. And that is the foundation of all of them. They all follow those common preliminaries, the four thoughts, on their way to enlightenment. And so by reflecting on that, we then will begin to make an effort to free ourselves from the suffering of samsara. And so it's the reason why it is called common preliminaries is because it is a practice, a shared practice that is practiced in all the different Buddhist traditions.
Teni tara ngarang suti lodon namba hiend teni ngage lobjong yapo ri nyamni yapo chepa yena teni chirang chupa yapo chagayo ta chirang tikba kawana na chupa yena chirang chupa yapo chagayo re tara ngazo buge nani jepju mala repa se ta chupa chot chupa chagayo ta 세종사 주바 배 그체 약시 좀데 약시 세 dimba 차고요 다때 가르긴 데이터 차버리세나 콩티 로도 남게 하짱게 냠니 땡사포 남발을 때네 되네 콩치바 약부 차버리스 때에 되네 마음소연지 대게 지신 주바 인도 되네 제 주바 약부 차고나 되네 로도 남게 돼 양성하고 삼노다야 약부 담보 쳐 로병시야 되네 양서 삼노다네 냠니 시고야 su chakyo res den du tene tren nga so kap so papala dara lodo namba yog na ne lodo tambo de yin tambo tene tamjon ni pa kawa se ya Ini titini mahshugins.
So if you study the four thoughts and you practice the four thoughts really well, then you become a really good Dhamma practitioner. And that doesn't matter which vehicle you have entered, which vehicle you practice. But according to the Tibetan tradition, for example, Milarepa is really considered to be the most supreme practitioner. He is like our kind of a prime example that we follow. He's the best, most accomplished practitioner. And the reason is because he had a very profound understanding and practice of those four thoughts that turn the mind. And this profound internalization of those four thoughts is really what made him such a great practitioner. And so likewise, if we follow his examples and we practice in a similar way, then we also become a great practitioner. So therefore, it is important that you first study, you learn about those four thoughts that turn the mind, and then again and again you think about them and you really practice them. And so today, of these four thoughts that turn the mind, I'm first going to speak about the first one, which is the difficulty of finding a precious human body.
Tani tab tamjoji nipar kawa seyate tani hakyang ke chodogolo tamjoji milindo hakyang ke chachimbores. Tela tani tesana tani nganaso tamjoji milurumboche seyake tonde deyun jugu yores. Pena nganaso roa redo simchi tamji nganaso sim yuba chikpare. Donghali chandu yuba chikpare, dewa tondu yuba chikpare. Yena ya Malin dugget any like a devan tarto by drip to your mato, letting him but in Sawan drip to your mares. There's nothing in Malin de la Tamju Milun Boche, say, the Hakyang get any Sachimbo imba. The you Sachimbo Chagayores, cool. Leka Jachimbo let to euros, Java Jachimbo top euros, the you Tamju Milis. Gigambo Bagasong, you and draw a dog and Lut Tamjan and Lutin. Teni moyo lutin te teni chet papa res. Tine meluri chin choso. Kare chen sungor sena ko donga le tartopa. Tarto ke teni sanji ji konfa drop to teni melin do khona ke teni drop to yoza teni meli jiren boche se te yu chag yores.
So this body, this human body that is so difficult to find and endowed with freedoms and fortunes is extremely precious. And so that's why we call it a precious human body. And so the reason why we say that it is so precious is because all the sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsara, we have the same mind. The mind is the same. And we all have the same wish. They all want to become free from suffering. And we all want to be happy. That we all share in common. So however, it is only the precious human body that can accomplish ultimate happiness, enlightenment. One cannot accomplish that with any other body, only with the human body. And that is the reason why we say that this human body is so important and so precious. It is because we can accomplish something very magnificent with it. A very magnificent result, a vast result can be accomplished. So Gampopa therefore had said that among the 6 realms of samsara, the human body is the most supreme. So therefore he said the working basis, the support is the precious human body. It is so precious because it is through this body that we can become liberated from the suffering of samsara and that we can attain the ultimate state of enlightenment. So the only body that can accomplish that is the human body, and that is why we call it the precious human body.
담조지 멜리세야 책이 연구도 달 njorse야 책이 연구 단조르세야 다리 시바데 가리 띵게 요르세나 치랑은 담배 추드야 그랬더니 두추요 봐. 치랑은 차진요 봐. 고갑요 봐들 다르스. 조르세야 될 치랑은 추드야 그 tun지 차상와요 되버는 조르세야 될 담조를 쓰요다. 멀리 톱체를 담조지 멀리는 뭐체 세요 말이. 추드야 그 tun지 차상고레스. 텔레트니 멀리는 뭐체 쓰는 시고요. 뭐 정말 멀리 차가요. 멀리는 뭐체 차가요 말이지. 멀라양 코나 추드야 그 tun지 창다 마창. 드니 드니 담조 좁제 세야 디드니 거였다. 담조 좁제 상황이나 멀리는 버치리스. 멀리 인자 담조 좁제 마상황이나 멀리는 버치 차고 말은 멀리 짬보 바스. 드니 차로요레스.
So the precious human body possesses qualities of freedom, or like fortune, and like advantages of freedom. First term, freedom, has to do with us having time or having an opportunity, having the conditions in order to practice the Holy Dharma. So we have the freedom to practice the Dharma. And the second term, advantages, means that we have the real conditions, not just the time, but also the various conditions to practice the Dharma. And so what that implies is that not everyone who has a human body has a precious human body, because not everyone has those freedoms and advantages. So in order to have a precious human body, one must have both the freedoms and advantages. And we speak about 18, there's 18 freedoms and advantages. And these are the various conditions that we must have in order to be called a precious human body. And if these are incomplete, then even though one has a human body, if those 18 conditions are incomplete, if one is lacking, then one doesn't have a precious human body. Then one has, again, ordinary human body.
담조 쪽에 장가에서 마치 송양을와 코란서다 창망치 법용신이래 당보바 인도 장가에서 시고야 기침벌이 남주다 시다 송고요 말와스 근데 제당 망보지 희유지래 얘네야 망보지 희유지만 되는데 다른 안서 법용 투 삼곰 세 som시기와 되는데 다른 안서 투바 법용신이 돼 투고에 차대요래 용 코란은도 되는데 대마송양을와
So I'm going to read the list of these 18 qualities, these freedoms and advantages. And it's important to know about them, especially for beginning practitioners, even though we always mention them. Maybe many of you know about them, but many might not know about them. And so generally for Dharma practice, we have to hear, we have to reflect, and we have to practice and meditate. And so today we are hearing, which is the studying part. So we need to hear the Dharma. And so therefore I'm going to read these 18 qualities. So first the 8 unfree states. So we are free of 8 states, which is we are free of birth in hell, of birth as a hungry spirit, as an animal, in a borderland, free of birth as a long-lived God, free of someone holding wrong views, and at a time, free of being born at a time where the Buddha has not appeared, and free of having one's sense faculties incomplete. So these are the first 8. Tambogi dancer, Ratini, Shamba dancer, Logora.
Tawagi, they love you.
Tawaki line, Danda.
Oh, yeah, thing it on the
Tawaki.
Any that sense doing 담보 물류 마타바이나 냐바 나나가 계속이나 되는 걸 담보 주주야 tun지 창금도 왔어 벤나 냐바나나 계속이나 냐바 동하 사지 마차바 요로스 동하 나니 코라 되네 동하 나는 디나나 데도 지리마도 담보 주다 산지 그 자sam에 코스 투요 말에 대에도 담보 주 시해요 말 장 투요 말에 되네 동하테 나는 되네 동하테 나는 내게요레스 대 여다로지나 예디나 이리 담보 주다 산지 그 자sam에 투요 말에 줌제 가와시 다 여다스야데 코 티코 상지메 티코 게 동하요라 디나나 코라 다베 사야 통야 디나나 데마니네 다티 동하게 나는 되게요 든로로지나 다 가중 웃음 통투부도 왔어 든로라나 다 이행이 꼬주시야 로 찍찍 사야 단 너는 안자 진능 코나 때니 든나tiu 코나 때니 되게도 왔어 담배 취해 희요 말이나 되니 쥐 지하게 되는 tun지 간야 공인 소송가 상비요 말레스 답변나 연 탁업세야 돼 담배추 마더사 뭐 당하는 직딩 뭐를 제양 쓰거 담배추 마더사 변나 산지기 출로 미사를 제송하이나 다 연 탁업세요 되는 나게 담배추다 렘데 하고 말이 물리 인자 주라는 담배추도 약간 tun지 상비요 말레스 플라시는 보세요 되나 플라라 라라다 주당 라ring 망보 요ren 도나 라 코랑소 데지 빠드미 바요 코랑소라 네캅게 데지 로딱타 똥타 망보 데트야 그때네 베 데지 요레 데네 텔 파싱 로야마도 데네 제 산지에 추냠니세야 수삼은 코고요 말이 코랑소 데네 데 추드야 투지 마상와리도 록다진세야 머지장스가 머지네 변에 담배 취유사를 제장 담배 취 고장 되네 얘나 양아라서 같이 주로 켈링은 뭐도 같이 지와 하나마다 지와 스마 켈링은 뭐도 같이 그런 레짐제 켈링은 뭐도 또 달로 퍼타와 시가 록다진스 대답더니 지와 근데 록다진 지와 나서만 얘나 되네 담배 취 조금 뭐도 왔어 tun지 창금 뭐도 왔어 대라긴 담
So first for these 8 freedoms. So the first one is being born in hell. So when you're born in hell, then you don't have a precious human body and you have no opportunity at all to practice the Dharma. There is just too much suffering in hell. And so this entire time, you really just are in the midst of all this suffering. And you don't even hear the sound of the Buddha. So that you clearly will not be able to understand the Dharma there or practice the Dharma. You're just basically immersed fully in suffering all the time. And similar with the hungry spirits, also hungry spirits do not have an opportunity to practice the Dharma, and the sound of the Buddha is unheard of. And they, due to the force of their karma, they roam around experiencing the suffering of hunger and thirst and so forth. And they never find any food or drink. So they are caught up in this cycle of suffering. And then for the animals, we can see their suffering. They are abused or used by others, and they prey upon each other, they eat each other. So they spend their lives in constant fear and panic all the time. So they have no way to practice the Dharma or understand the Dharma. And then regarding those borderlands, so that could be in this world, but a place where the Dharma has not spread. So even though one is born in this world, if one is born in a place where the Dharma has not appeared, then also one will not be able to understand it or understand karma, even though one has a human body. And then the long-lived gods, there's many different kinds of gods, but in brief, a god is a being who is in a temporary state of inconceivable, incredible bliss and happiness. And they spent hundreds and thousands of years in complete bliss, and they are distracted by that, and therefore it doesn't occur to them to even practice the Dharma. So they don't have the condition to practice. And then there's those holding wrong views. Even though one might be born as a human being, and even in a place where the Dharma has appeared, and one might hear about the Dharma, but some people just don't believe or accept any religion, and they don't believe in past and future lives or karma, cause and effect. And so because of that, they develop different wrong views. And then again, they do not have an opportunity to practice the Dharma.
Teni sanje mazon putu senatara karpa jatong chupa mangpo ta nga so tendri jine sungu yore tendi karpa kakhe la sanje song chu song tendri chaga yore karpa kakhe la sanje juni mazon ne nga so mumpo karpa sege sanje juni mazon ma jene teni yang karpa mangpo tezo chu mi pa tendri chaga yore teni tezo je song yana teni yang 멀리 톱장하나 저쪽으로 주도야 tun지 참고요 말이 대인들 산지 마좀 받다 최소만이나 되니 국발을 지나서 국발을 지성하나 나다 국바 나 국바 이 국바 망보여라 되는 조 너는 이 국바이나 되니 나게 저 주로병세야 하고고 말was 또 소리나 국바 지성하나 야 주시야 뭐 콤바리 단테 되는 너는 다뭐 콤바 제뭐 콤바 내제스 디네 제데 나그 류랑송아이나 담모 콤바네제레 제송아리 덴 추조야 퉁지 창고요마 디제데 가와제와이나 제발랑와이나 디니 추조야 퉁지 마창와인자 뭐 콤바네제스 다 담조지밀레세 톱센 디네제레 강야라 마치네 로와 뭐 텔레 탑데바이나 디니 다르세야 디니 딩거요레세
And then there's the next one is being born in a time where the Buddha has not appeared. So here we are speaking in terms of many different aeons. And so there are some aeons, there are some ages, sometimes when the Buddha appears and teaches the Dharma. And then there are some times, some kalpa, some aeons where the Buddha, no Buddha appears and no Dharma is taught. And that is what we call it a dark aeon. And so then once you're born there, even though you might be a human being, you have no possibility to practice the Dharma at all. And then the last one is to be born with incomplete sense faculties. And so that can be of different kinds. For example, it can mean that one is not able to speak, so one is a mute. And also it can have something to do with one's mind. It's mainly the impairment of the mind that we're speaking about here, because when the mind is impaired, then we cannot really study and understand the Dharma. So that's also an unfree state. So these are the 8 unfree states. And if one takes birth in any of those 8, even if it might be a human body, one does not have the criteria, the conditions to practice the Dharma. So being free of those 8 unfree states means that one is not born in any of those 8 states. And so for this reason, being free from them, these 8 are called the 8 freedoms. So then next are the 10 kind of external or circumstantial advantages that one is that one has. And so these are first one is born as a human, you're born as a human being, then you're born in a central land, then there where the Mahayana has spread, you have your sense faculties complete, you are free from extreme karmic actions, and you have faith in the teachings of the three jewels. So these are the five personal advantages, and then there is five external advantages, which is that the Buddha has appeared, then the Buddha had taught the Dharma, then these Dharma teachings still remain, then there are followers of these Dharma teachings, which are the teachers of the Mahayana, and then those followers, those practitioners, care for each other with love.
다 머니 집아스 담보 담보 때라더니 람종아들이도 람종아테 담보 머르지바 되니 뭐를 tin 톰네야 제사케 사자요로 제사케 사자 요르스 집아스야 돼 담배추요사 담배추 다 대살라 되니 요르스 집아스 담배추 다사 제와이나 되니 요르 착요레스 nomba 가와지나 담배추요나 저거요레스 되니 왕보 창와 세디다 왕보 국바 많이 반도나 왕보 창와 레전 타 말로바 세야데 단 레와나나 가리송도스는 참이길래 맞이바 송도 단 참이길래 세야데 되니 참이가 세기랑 하나 남주 참이가 세야데 파세바 마세바 자종바세바 겐동그 인세바 다 되니 산지의 거랑니 셈지바 세야데 참이가 세야데 딕바 저단 딕발 샤 다그 참이가 샤 투비요 말이스다 하장 딕바 체잖아 델tin 참이가 세야 그 좀시 던지리스 대답은 참이길래 마세바 내가 대바 세야데 다 먹을 룰리지네 되니 나게 콘조스는 대바 세야데 다 대가요나 대가 창와이나 되는 람정아 세겨레스
So first are the five personal advantages, and the first one is that you're born as a human being. And then secondly, also in a central land. So a central land is a place where the Dharma has spread. It can be any place, but it's where the Dharma has spread. And then third is that your sense faculties are not impaired. And being free of extreme karma means that you have not committed one of the five immediate retribution, which is to have killed your father, your mother, and arhat, to have caused a division in the Sangha, and to have developed an evil mind, like to harm the Buddha's body with an evil mind. So generally it is said that we can actually confess and purify any negativity, but these five cannot be easily purified because the evil in them, the negativity is just too strong. So these are those five acts with immediate retribution. So we are free of them. And then also we are, we have faith in the teachings. So we have a faith in the teachings of the three jewels. So having all these five means that we possess the five personal advantages.
람종아 세다 랑원이 창고야긴 튼징아 다 담배추 줘야를 때는 여주고니 창고야긴 튼징아요 거요 데라 담보 때를 때는 산지에 좀바스 산지 마존부터는 맞게바체 산지 숨부터라 제 로와 산지 직딩 감수손 데니 산지 직딩 감수손은 참서 담배추 마송와 던데 연구요서리 던데 많이 받잖아 데니 산지게 되니 추중 콜로코바 산지게 추중 콜로콜 추송마 추송은 직딩 감수되니 추송마다 추송내야 참서 띵바네 제존은 되니 담배추 밀리 차도도 와서 추 넘로요 여러봐서 던데 많이 봐 데니 담배추야 요대봐 대기 띵바네 봐서야 돼 담배추 요대봐 직딩 감수 담배추 요대봐서야 되니 지슨 주바서야 되더니 대기 지슨 주바더니 개베히니 나라 추 람도스니 요대봐 Choose Pali Yinj Zebao, say a teleta, the tongue Mambo use at its own donor, gave him a gist zone. Tendi is. That day, Tabana, that should do Yakatan, 20 chats on what you on Sangudos, Ramjong at the Himjong as. That day, not so tagung, Sangu even though. That day, Sang Naranga, which it done, Sangi, Sangudos, Tang, some milli top at Sanji Chunure, some Tambachula Depan Dumban Yure, Tamjo Milli chaps on the top the Yure, some years. Tamjo Milli Bochery, some years, and the summer. Kawada Kardin say that they Tambuchu do it, not about 20 chats on you debate. They ain't not so covered the Dimba say, Kardin Chakura. Kardin Lento in Sumudo. Tanga some Kardin Lento Shada is.
So these are the 5 personal advantages that need to be complete. And then there are 5 kind of external advantages in terms of the environment that need to be complete. And that is, first of all, the Buddha has to appear. And so then, so the Buddha has appeared. But the Buddha, not only has he appeared, he also taught the Dharma. So sometimes there are times where a Buddha appears, but he doesn't teach the Dharma. So this is not the case. The Buddha has also taught the Dharma in this world. He turned the wheel of Dharma. And then that might be the case, but sometimes the Dharma might first appear and then disappear again. Sometimes the Dharma does not remain. So now the Dharma still remains. And then also there are those who follow those Dharma teachings. So there are the various spiritual teachers then who can show us the path, who can show us the Dharma. So there are many spiritual teachers who are there. And then also they look after us with great love, loving kindness. And so these are the 5 circumstantial or external advantages to have complete. And so we should look for ourselves, do I have all of these criteria complete or not? And actually, I think when I look at it, I think that we all have them all complete. We all have a precious human body because we are all born as a human being, and the Buddha Dharma is here. We receive the teachings and we all have faith and devotion to the teachings. So in my mind, we all of us possess a precious human body with all these 18 freedoms and advantages. And actually that is what we call a fortunate one. A fortunate one is one who has those criteria to practice the Dharma, who has a precious human body endowed with those freedoms and advantages. So such a fortunate one, also one that we call someone who possesses fortunate karma, a karmically destined one. And I think that we all are such karmically destined ones.
Tamjo million boche say a tan dodden that Tamjo letting Sangdeba. The Yena didn't ask Tamjo million boches. The Tavan 20 Sangde by Yena, then million boche chakayore. That cup did the Chira Tamjo million boche say at the Chira Lobjon Chechon. Yamana Chira Lo Chechon. Yamana China Jo Chechon. Yamana Chira Namba Chechon. So Kangyan Tenetini, Chirano Tamjo million boche Shagomari. 다라 창고야겠다 담비추줘야겠 튼기 차창어지 이나 드니치라 머레 가래 예나리 로게 유칸데 예나이 단 돈나 머리는 뭐치 세야드니 죽어요레스 다테린 탕치 보차고요레스.
So anyone who possesses those freedoms and advantages complete possesses a precious human body. And so here we are not speaking about, it doesn't matter how educated you are or how old you are or how wealthy you are, how much money you have, or how beautiful you are, or what kind of nationality or ethnical group you belong to, it all doesn't matter when it comes to the practice of the Dharma. What matters is having or not having these freedoms and advantages. And if you have them, regardless of anything else, you have a precious human body, and it's extremely valuable, extremely precious. And this precious human body with those 18 freedoms and advantages is extremely difficult to find. It's very hard to obtain such a body.
Jamson on the Rabaki Nepate, Lord Jajana, Ting Dong Bana, Nyashin Popaki, Longe Kiki Chang, Sajik the Madupa Chupa Pagan Rimpa Chupa Si the Ronge. And Coatang in Songle, Melinipa, Deve Ledge and Kabar Sombaso, big on the Nipa Katsaridos, Techirama Latusarve. Namju Mabosongo, Lamasame.
So then to understand how difficult it is to find a precious human body, it is explained in terms of illustrations, causes, and numbers. So these show how hard it is to find a precious human body. And so in terms of illustration, there is one illustration that shows how difficult it is to find a precious human body. And so that's a story about, so there is a blind turtle on the bottom of the ocean, and only once every 100 years, it rises up to the surface. And so on the surface, there is a wooden yoke, like a wooden ring that constantly moves back and forth, blown about by the wind. And it doesn't stay in one place, even for just a moment. All the time it moves around on the surface of the ocean. And so then once every 100 years, that blind turtle comes up to the surface of the ocean. And there is, of course, a very slight possibility for the turtle to stick its neck right through the wooden ring. It's not impossible. It's, however, highly unlikely. And so to find a precious human body is even more unlikely, even more difficult than that blind turtle sticking its neck right through the wooden yoke once every 100 years.
That they pay on it in Nipar Kawas. That pay tell us some of the time, Mali top of hot young lady Kawari doas. The so Dutch of Ogolo, Munja, Kedra Coman and the song was. Conan be Jim Sing it and it's Oma, pay Yoko and answer no to Chigores. Conan be Zonsongo Maravas, then we will to so young weary. Manazo San Melita had young lay lowers and Mamangoyers, Bilem Kashiji Euro, some way or Manazo San that Mango is on Simki Chang the Chis on to me, but Chang, but Chan Sailor. Then a military hatching no the teeth and then a military hatching cable couple in Batini. So young Haku those. That courage and a Tamjo military topper cow is an ass. Courage and a topper cow is an ass. That's what it is. Oh, yeah, that the courage cow is in a lady. Oh, Tamjo military topic judge your one. Judge me that pay Hajanke. Nunuris, that judge pay Nunuris. The judge me Nunuris, the military, Hajan Cable Capucharis. Penang answer. Much the child you gonna tap it number Yuni Mahajang Nunura. Jazan Chimbo to the Yuni Hajam Manunura, Karajin, te pamjo chi bungu mangbo goro ngu mangbo mit nyo tu yo marwas oh pe tin iris dara tamjo ju mili thoba tele te thobya ge jo tene tambo chu dumni hajang ge nyong ri tene te ri se tene tam mili tu nyong chagres kare gen tendre mili te thobya ge jo tene tendre kable khale khapo ri se na ma chu du yo mas jo te kare ri se na ta jo te ngaran so gewa hi pa te gewa dumni te nyong yin te tene mili thobya hajang kable khapo chares gewa kare ri se na se ta yong na kare so ko se na tamjo ju lu ne chuchum pusum cho bala so ba gewa sa ba le top sir jo go ne ni par ka wa tang som ta tamjo ju lu chuchum pusum cho ba se na ngarang la tara tamjo mili thoya ge jo kare se na jo chuchum number ta ba se go chuchum number ta ba se de pe na ngarang so cham ro ge dom ba yin na ri ge ni ge dom ba yin na ri ge chulong ge dom ba yin na ri 다 너는 나 송사 동바지 쉬어요. 와 때랑 아주 추름 나고요. 대 답다 랑 동바카레 토바이나 대 들이 추름 남바 답때 송네 시걸. 대기 땡니 되는 나게 다 개와 푸슴 초바지 두고 개와 푸슴 초바카레. 되는 나랑게 다 임바타야 추름 송에 주바 고미야. 단 너나 파신 좀 냠슬라네. 너나 삼바 되는 게 이게 지신 보고네. 되는 파신 좀 냠네시야. 되네 타르드네 몰라 남바 답바게 되네 몽람도 소 약혼 데 밀리 토비아 오 데타부터 저 추tum 남파 답더니 좀 무슨 소바 냠슬랑네 데니 나게 파 모아모라 야포세나 데니 밀리 토고도 와시 오다 데스니도 하장 용용리도 와시 데스니도 하장 용용리 쳐도 다베 데니 밀리 토야 하장 용용 차 갑레 커부차레 데 dum니 담베추 dum니다 하장 갑레 커부 하장 용용리 와시 나 좀 직딩 칸 뭐마보도 뭐 빌렘 카히디도 디나나 남부 추 냠니스니 같이도 플롭용스니 같이도 디나나 응네 냠니 지니 같이도 냠니 지니 예나야 디나나 응네 체도 딩바 지니 같이도 빼 뉴뉴리다 nga chha ko tu do was pe na rang so so la nga so pe chama pe namba hyubi ji 냠니 지기 요르바 니마레레 나 nga so 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 힘주 지나 pe 담배 추 dum니 배 체드 딩방 안 하겠지 배 소소 숭자게 돈바스 좀 야보송 투고도 배는 점점 돈반을 지는 야보송 투고도 배는 개니게 돈반을 있는 야보송 투고도 로와 비슷한 삼로지다 대게 송 투고요나 뒤때네 딩 하고 파신 파로신 바통 냠니 같이 지기도 배는 삼바된 힘게 같이 공부도 니마레라 오다 뒤쪽때네 되네 삼로 땅와 있는 되니 나라 삼로 땅와 대기 때네 되네 삼로지다나 다 담배 추 dum니데 하장 갑레 커보리도 와시 하장 갑레 커보 인서도 드니 담주 밀리 토베때 하장 갑레 커보 디든 차고요레스
So here we can see through the illustration how hard it is to find a precious human body. So when you hear that, it seems really so difficult. Now this is why the past masters have said it's so difficult. They use this example to show, to make us really realize that this is really how hard it is. And those past masters, of course, they didn't tell us any lies. They just told us how things really are. So if you really think about it, now, for example, in this world, we think that it's not so difficult to be a human being because there are so many human beings in this world. So we think it can't be that hard. There's a few billion people here. But actually, now we come to the numbers. It's actually, there are inconceivable numbers of sentient beings. We can't even count them. There are so many different sentient beings. Beings, we can see that there's really only very few in comparison. To that. So it's very difficult to find. So the question here really is, why is it so difficult to find a precious human body? And the answer is in terms of the cause, because it is because there is not a lot of people who actually create the causes for being born as a human being. That's why it's so difficult. For example, if you're very rich, like how many people can buy a yacht, like a boat? Not a lot, because it's very expensive, right? So it's just like that. It's very hard for people to have this exceptional state where one can actually practice the Dharma perfectly. There's really not many. And so why is it so hard to be a precious human being? It's because we don't really practice the Dharma. We need to create the cause, and the cause is to practice virtue. And there's only very few who practice virtue. And so what's virtue? So it's mentioned here in the text that the cause for being born as a human being is to practice perfect ethical discipline. And so ethical discipline refers to, for example, any vow that you have taken, for example, the refuge vow, or the layperson vows, or the monks or nuns vows. And so to keep that vow perfectly is to keep ethical discipline perfectly. And now, when you think of any vow that you have received, do you really perfectly always keep that vow? What does it mean? So you practice at all times, you practice perfect generosity, and you keep your vows, and you practice patience. You practice the 6 paramitas. You practice love and compassion all the time. And also you make a perfect aspiration prayer to be born as a human being. So all of these are the causes of birth as a human being. And then when we look at it, we can see there's not so many people who do that, right? Not many people create these causes. There's not many people who practice the Dharma perfectly. Now we have said there's billions of people in this world, but of all these people, how many people really actually study the Dharma? And then of the people who do study the Dharma, how many people actually practice the Dharma? And then of the people who practice the Dharma, how many actually really practice the Dharma in an authentic way? So we can see there is so few. And even when we just look at ourselves, each and every day, we take a very careful look at ourselves. Each and every day, for example, think of a vow that you have taken, like the refuge vow. Are you perfectly keeping this vow each and every day? Or are you able to keep any of your other vows? Or are you perfectly practicing your monk's vows or your layperson's vows perfectly each and every day? So we can see just by looking at ourselves that it's not so easy to create the causes. And then if we can't do that, we can also kind of extrapolate that to others and see that how many others can actually do that, practice perfectly the 6 paramitas, and how much love and compassion really arises in my mind on a daily basis. So if I think in this way, I can really understand that how hard it is to find a precious human body.
That this would put it the inside wa. The chapsan roma that's any sendo chigarwa. The one that is I jana. Chutu senso.
So the time, sorry,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So time has come. So we were not able to finish the precious human body at this time, but we will continue next time.
Cheta na chargi na nimare na Ngondro rogo sams. Ngondro desin chu yore te zin nga so khare te ngara so lechin chu chu yo lechin chu chi na de Ngondro chu chi den rogo sams de ina tereng den ro ma de sani de ne tereng den jo zo de mata pa de sani kran ni chala man jo zo pa chi yes.
So because we have 11 classes and 11 points, I thought that in each class I'm going to cover completely one point, but now in the first class I didn't complete the first point. So anyways, when we come to the next point, which is impermanence, I'm going to, during the impermanence class, then I'm also going to complete this point first.
The trouble yang mampu is at the end sunny, then but yes.
And so also there probably are a lot of questions. So then you can also the next time ask those questions.
So
now please dedicate.
Om Dadang Konde Tan Jeja Tusana Sabatan Yupen Giva Zawande Dadang Simjian Tamje Nyurdu Lana Miba Yanda Bazube Janjurum Boje Doba Jurji Chanjo Simjo Ramboy Che Maji Panan Jija Jiba Nyamba Miba Kone Kondam Pava Yu Oy Mane Be Me Honru 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 Om Mane Be Me Honru Om Mane Be Me Honru Om Mane Be Me Honru. Thank you very much, everybody. Chahidele. See you next week, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dozin Rinpoche, for
Shitele.
precious teaching. Thank you to Ina. You actually woke up at 4 a.m. to start the translation for us. And thank you to all other interpreters.